Hey y'all, welcome back to the Goals and Globes podcast. I'm your host, Latricia Jacobs. My sole purpose with this podcast is to teach you how to step into your glow up season and intentionally create the next level version of yourself. So grab your headphones, open up your notes app, and let's dive in. All right. Hey, you guys. Welcome back to the podcast. So today's topic is self-care versus self-love. So I feel like this was an important topic because this is something that I talk about a lot, either on my Instagram or pretty much in any of the content that I create. Like, I'm working on a goal setting planner for you guys. And one of the things that I baked into that was self-care and self-love, because that is a part of setting goals, achieving your goals, and actually doing the work. So it is that important. So I wanted to make sure that one of these foundational episodes for the podcast was about this topic. And actually this entire week, so I have 3 podcast episodes scheduled for this week. And I'm going to tell you about those later. But this entire week, we're talking about self-care and self-love because it really is that important, right? Everything that you do and how you show up goes back to one of those two things, right? Either it's an action or it's a feeling that you have. And I wanted to break down the difference between these two things because they are often very confused. And there's some other terms out there like self-worth, all these other self-acceptance and all these other different terms. And they all have their different meanings, but sometimes we tend to couple them all together. And more importantly, I think this happens a lot with the self-love and self-care. And that's why I wanted to focus on those two things, because I do feel like those are the two that we tend to group together when they are not the same thing. And because we put them in a group together and we assume that they mean the same thing, we don't work on them separately. And in order to fully embody them and the power that they can have, you do have to treat them as two separate things. So let's talk about it. So in this episode, I'm going to actually break down, what does self-love look like? What is it actually? And then what is self-care actually? And then I'll share the other 2 podcast episodes that'll be going live this week so that you know what to expect and you come back and hang out. Okay. So let's first talk about self-love and what that actually means. So when we think about self-care, see, I'm already messing up. I'm looking at my notes on my computer while I'm talking. But when we think about self-love, it really is the core of why you want to be better and why you want to do better for yourself, right? So the way I have it written is the core of why you want more and better for yourself. And that really is what self-love is. So self-love is why are you even listening to this podcast and other podcasts that you listen to? Why do you care about the relationship that you have with God or whatever you believe in? Now, y'all know I rocks with Jesus and God, but whatever it is that you believe in, why do you care about that relationship? Why do you want to lose weight? Why is that important to you? That is what self-love is. Self-love is not going to the gym to lose weight. Self-love is the reason behind all of the other actions that you take. And when people tell me they can't be consistent with certain things, and like I said, I'm working on a goal setting planner for you guys. So when that is live, I'll have a podcast episode about it. But this is something I talked about in there, was that when people tell me they're not being consistent with working out or eating healthy or relationship boundaries or dealing with their mother, dealing with their children and things like that, it's because there is a lack of self-love there, right? It's not a lack of self-care in the actions. There is a reason why you're not able to consistently do the things that you say, and I'm doing quotes, right, that you say is important to you. And a lot of the times we go immediately to the self-care side of things, like, oh, well, you need to soak in a bubble bath longer, or, you need to work out more. Like, if we don't acknowledge and go deep with the root, and the root is the self-care part, right? There's a reason, like I said, why you're not doing the things, and we need to figure out why you're not doing the things. So that is what self-love is. So self-love is basically seeing yourself as worthy to work on, right? You listening to this podcast and listening to me, and I'm pretty sure you listen to other personal growth and mindset and motivation podcasts, or when you save a quote or a post that you like on Instagram or any of those things, that is you showing yourself that you're worthy to work on, right? And like I said, we're going to get into self-care, because self-care is the implementation and execution of these feelings. But when you say I have a lot of self-love, you're saying that I know me enough. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. And I know that I am worthy to work on, because we are an ever evolving process, right? We never fully get 100%. You're always working on yourself. And when you don't, that means that you're staying complacent and comfortable. If there's not anything in your life, if there isn't anything in your life that you are currently working on improving, that's not always a good sign. Now, I'm not talking about seasons of rest. Sometimes you do just need to step back and acknowledge all the hard work that you've done. You don't always have to be in hustle mode, but that is a season. That shouldn't be multiple seasons. That shouldn't be years. You should always be progressing in some shape, form, or fashion. And this doesn't have to be like groundbreaking or super complicated or anything like that, but it does need to be intentional, and it needs to be constantly moving yourself forward, right? Now, the other thing about self-love is it is being disciplined enough to actually do the work. So it's not enough to know that you actually are worthy of working on. You actually have to be disciplined enough to actually do the things you know that you're worthy of, right? So this is the part that directly feeds into self-care. So I always like to use the weight loss example because I just feel like that's universal. We can all kind of relate to that, whether you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, right? The fitness is pretty, and wellness and eating healthy. It's kind of universal, right? When you talk about like business and stuff, not everybody has business. Not everybody wants to have a side hustle or be an entrepreneur, but we all want to feel better, live better, look better, right? So that's just an easy example. But when we think about like working out, right, it is one thing to know that I'm worthy of having a healthier body. Again, whether it's eating better, losing weight, or gaining weight, because there are some people, I think online and social media makes it seem like everybody wants to lose weight, but I have some friends who want to gain weight. Like they're like, I'm tired of being skinny, or they just want to put on weight in certain areas of their body, right? Maybe they want a bigger booty, they want abs, or whatever it is that they want, right? So yeah, that's a little tangent. Anyway, get back on topic. So it's one thing to know that you're worthy of this, but the other side of self-love is being disciplined enough to do the work. So I kind of talked about that a minute ago when I said that I talk to people who have goals and they have things that they're working on, but they're not actually doing it. So setting the plan is you knowing that you're worthy of more, but the other side of that is being disciplined enough to actually do the work. So it's one thing to have a 90-day plan, but it's another thing to actually execute the plan, right? So all of that side of things is considered the self-love side of things. Now, the actually executing and doing the plan is the self-care side of things, okay? The other part of self-love is accepting yourself for who and what you are. And this is really an ever-evolving thing, right? For example, my body now does not look the same as before I had my kids, right? And the same thing for pretty much every woman, right? And this is not just physical things. Like I said, I just use these examples because they're easier to describe and get you guys to understand where I'm going, right? Just how you look now may not be how you looked 10 years ago, right? The business that you're building won't look the same 6 years from now as it does today, right? So part of self-love is accepting everything about you, not just how you look, but it's how you show up. It's how you run your business. It's how you show up at work. Everything about you, because everything that you do is a representation of who and what you are. And part of self-love is accepting that and understanding that it will grow and change, right? You won't operate the same you do now in an entry level position as your job as when you are promoted 3 times, right? You're going to carry yourself different. You're going to look different. You're going to evolve into that next level version of you. But self-love is loving yourself at every step of the journey. So that means loving yourself when things are not going great, when the business is not popping off, when people are overlooking you at work, or when you're a little bit heavier than what you want to be, or you're a little bit smaller than what you want to be, or when instead of giving people grace, you pop off and then you got to go pray about it and ask for forgiveness, right? It's about all of that. You can't love certain parts of you and not love the other parts. And so in my opinion, True self-love happens when you love the good and the bad of yourself, because I'm a firm believer that we can't fix what we won't acknowledge. I say that to my sister. I say that to my kids. I say that to everybody because I feel like it's one of those big things. You can't get through what you won't go through. Oh, that's the word. Y'all, I'm grabbing my notepad because I'm like, that's going to be one of my next tweets, or not tweets. I don't know why I always say tweets. I don't even be on Twitter. I think the graphic template that I use looks like a tweet, so I always say tweet, but it's not. But that's going to be one of my next reels, because you can't go through, that needs to be like on a shirt or something. You literally cannot grow through what you won't go through. And I didn't even have that written down. That was just, and I think that's just hitting home to me too, but you really can't. Like, you can't grow through what you won't go through, right? So that is why accepting and loving every single part of yourself is important, because in order to truly say that you are practicing self-love and you have love for yourself, is to accept the good and the bad. That means you have to love yourself when you're a size 6 or you're a size 16. Okay? You have to do that. And now part of that is through the self-love part, those daily actions that you do to reinforce that love. And we'll get to that in a minute. The last thing I want to say about self-love is that it's an ever evolving relationship with who you are and where you're going. And this is why I've kind of already harped on this quite a bit, was that part of self-love is loving yourself at every single process or every single step of the journey. Like, you have to love yourself at every single step of the journey. Now, this is not me saying that that's going to be easy. Y'all already know how I feel about that word. Like, no, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. And it's not something that you're going to fully get 100%. If you started out as a size 6 and then somehow got to a size 16, right? Because of whatever the reason was, whether it was illness, it was just, emotional eating, whatever the reason was, you do have to relearn to love yourself in a different way. Maybe the asset that was the most important to you is no longer, right? Maybe your hips used to be your thing, but now you're like, nah, that's not it, because they doing their own thing. So maybe it's your lips now, right? It's a process. Like, you have to continue to do the work to constantly love yourself. And this is why I say that self-love and self-care are not the same thing, because I hope that you guys can see now by kind of talking about self-love, how it differs from self-care, right? So let's kind of transition into self-care. So if self-love is all about the feelings and the mindset behind things, self-care are the actions that you take to reinforce those feelings and that mindset. So when people tell me they struggle with self-care, again, it goes back to the mindset thing, because I can always tell by the way that you take care of yourself how much you love yourself. Right. And I think that's just with anybody. Right. And having a daughter is something that I preach to her as well. Right. Now, I tell my son as well, but your daughter, she has more feminine stuff. She wants to do all these things, and, just your relationship with daughter and thing they want to talk about are totally different than what my son wants to talk about, like NBA 2K24 or something like that, and why he needs it. And he wants to talk about LeBron's latest game. And part of it, if you don't have kids, part of being a mom is learning to adapt, right? So I'll have conversations with my daughter. We're talking about, nails. And one of the things I do every Sunday is I polish my daughter's nails. It's our little alone time. We bond, and, so we've been working on like different graphics and stuff. Y'all, I'm not a nail artist, but anyway, right? That was a little tangent again, but this is something that I am trying to teach to my daughter, is that I can tell her mood and how she feels by how she shows up. Now, the reason I can do this is because I'm her mother, and I know how she shows up when she's having a good day, and I know how she shows up when she's having a bad day. And as our personal journey, we have to also acknowledge that too, right? If you guys have listened to the previous episode, I told you guys I currently have a lot of health issues going on. And one of the main things that we're trying to get under control is the chronic migraines. And so the days where I'm having really bad migraines, you can tell, it's easy to tell, right? I ain't getting dressed. I'm not doing much of nothing. I don't really get out the bed. I'm just not doing much. Okay. I'm going to eat differently because I don't want to cook anything. Because another issue with my chronic migraines is I have chronic nausea. And so I'm not doing too much, okay? Versus the days where I feel good, I get up, I shower, I get dressed, I actually put on clothes, I do my hair, all those kind of things, right? Those are the self-care side of things. But I think that self-care is over glamorized because we make it seem like it has to always be something groundbreaking, right? Now, I went off on a whole little tangent there. So let's actually talk about self-care. I was just like, girl, what are you doing? That ain't even supposed to be in this episode. Get it back together. Okay. But anyway, self-care are the actions that you do that show the level of self-love that you have. That's where we were supposed to be talking about. But I feel like I kind of hit that point, right? You get it, right? I can tell based on your self-care actions what your self-love looks like. And you can do this internally, right? I'm pretty sure if you really sat down and thought about it, you would be able to tell based on the way you took care of yourself where you were at mentally on that day. Now, self-care consists of the physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional actions that you do to take care of yourself. And this is why I say that self-care is over glamorized, because a lot of the times they make it seem like, oh, going to get Starbucks, self-care day, going to get my nails done, self-care day. And it is. All those things are self-care. I'm all for it because if I want to treat myself, baby, I'm going to get in Starbucks line. Okay. It's just, it is what it is. And I'm going to take my picture. I'm going to tag it self-care and all those kind of things, because those things are a form of self-care, right? If you always want to go get your nails done, you always saving pictures on Instagram of people, cute nails, but you won't, and not saying you, let's say you have the money, but you won't go do it because you don't, we go back to the self-love. You don't feel like you're worthy of spending unnecessary money on yourself. That is a self-love issue, not a self-care issue. Okay. Now, the other side, like I said, that people don't talk about usually is the mental, spiritual, and emotional. We talk about the physical, like going to the gym, getting Starbucks, going to eat out, getting flued out, taking a trip, all those things. We talk about all of that, but it's the mental, spiritual, and emotional side of self-care that gets ignored. And I don't want to go too deep into this because I'm going to talk about this more in depth in a future episode. I really just want you guys to see the difference between these two. But self-care is about more than just those physical things that we can see. Sometimes self-care is going to lock yourself in a closet and just spending time with God because like somebody's going to help me make sense of all this, right? Sometimes self-care is journaling. Sometimes self-care is taking a nap. Right? Like it doesn't have to be super glamorous, and there's nothing wrong though with it being super glamorous. Like I said, going to get your new outfit, getting some Starbies or all that kind of stuff. Right? But we have to make sure that when it comes to self-care, we're focusing on the other things. And when there is a lack of those other areas, there usually is a lack of self-love, right? Because if you were truly in tune with yourself and clear on what you needed to work on, you would be probably hitting all of these areas or at least a few of them because you have more intense and deeper things that you need to work on than just getting your daily caffeine fix for the gram. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about with self-care is that self-care is also a part of the boundaries that you set around different areas of your life. And I believe that this is a form of self-care because in order to create those boundaries and implement them, that is an action. And so self-care is all about the different actions. Now, the reason for the boundaries would be part of self-love. So maybe you keep getting into with family members and they keep disrespecting you or whatever that looks like, right? So that reasoning and mindset is rooted in self-love and you showing up for what you need in that department. And then the execution of those boundaries, to me, in my opinion, are self-care, right? Implementing your boundaries and making people either get with it or get lost when it comes to boundaries is a form of self-care because that is a form of you doing an action to protect you, your peace, your sanity, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that is the two differences between self-love and self-care. So self-love, again, is more so the mindset and the feeling behind things, versus self-care is the action and implementation to make sure that the mindset and feelings that you have are being carried out. Now, I did want you guys to come back. Make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Right now, it is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And I'm working on some other platforms. It just hasn't been a priority yet. And if you need help with priorities, make sure to check out the previous episode, because I talked about how to be more productive in my 3 categories, on how I organize my tasks and things like that. But right now the podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. But make sure that you come back this week. I have 2 more planned episodes. Now, I'm not saying I won't throw some, other episodes in there, but I do have 2 more planned episodes. And so the next episode is going to be how to learn to love yourself. And so we're going to go deeper into that self-love, part of things. And then the episode after that is going to be stop glorifying self-care. So we're going to talk about how I talked about like posting on the gram and doing self-care that looks cute. I'm going to talk about what self-care can look like from the mental, spiritual, and emotional side, so that we make sure we're hitting things from all angles. So make sure that you come back for those. But that is it for this episode. As always, like I said, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review. Let me know what you think. Take a screenshot, tag me on Instagram at I'm Just Letitia, and I have my link down below in the description. But let me know that you listen and share it with a homegirl or 2. But that is it for this episode, you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.